Is it starting? Okay. Good evening, everybody. This this is Susan Kelb, and this is coming from my home in Ann Arbor. This is the first time I've ever live streamed, and I thank Jamie McGarrah so much for your help. Everybody. Uh-oh, I need to turn off my sound. There you go. So we're here, and it's a new world for us. I'd like to start off this meeting of the Huron Valley Group Sierra Club with a greeting from your president, Dan Ezekiel. So stand by, and here's Dan. And it's a new world for us. I'd like to start off this meeting of the Huron Valley Group Sierra Club with a greeting from your president, Dan Ezekiel.
I'm the chair of the executive committee of the Sierra Club Huron Valley.
It's a new world for us. I'd like to start off this meeting of the Huron Valley Group Sierra Club with a greeting from your president, Dan Ezekiel.
I'm the chair of the November elections of the Sierra Club Huron Valley.
It's a new world for us. I'd like to start off this meeting of the Huron Valley Group Sierra Club with a greeting from your president, Dan Ezekiel. So stand by.
November elections of the Sierra Club Huron Valley.
It's a new world for us. I'd like to start off this meeting of the Huron Valley Group Sierra Club with a greeting from your president, Dan Ezekiel. Okay. Don't give up. Okay. Please don't give up. I hope you stick with us because I'm sorry, but we were trying to feed Dan's audio through my computer, and that was pretty surreal. So Dan did have a nice greeting for you and a really nice introduction, but I'm afraid we're missing that. Thank you, Dan. And I think we'll have to go on with the meeting, and Dan can type in things for you at the end of the meeting in the chat. So, like I said, this is our first time doing this, and we're likely to hit some glitches. I'm really sorry that we're having to meet with you in this way at this time, but Dan really wanted to set an example here of stepping into the situation and using technology and keeping things going. I have to say I have learned a lot in the last couple of days in trying to get this going, and I'm really appreciative to any of you who are bearing with us and sticking with us in this. So anyway, I'm going to talk to you tonight about birds, and I hope we can just leave the realities of the world behind for a little bit. I have a fascination with nesting birds, and Dan told you about that in the introduction that you couldn't hear. I have been obsessed with my interest in nesting birds, and I come by it honestly, really. After college, I started my working life studying how birds select their habitat, or I was questioning how birds select their habitat and why. I worked on a couple of projects where we used the presence of bird species and the number of those birds to be a measure of the quality of habitat of an ecosystem. Really looking at the bird occurrence as a barometer of the health of plant communities in particular. I worked on my master's degree a long time ago in West Virginia where I asked how power line corridors that cut through forested areas in West Virginia affect the distribution of nesting birds. One thing that I found in that time was that, they make those clearings for power line corridors, and over time, the plants grow, the woody plants start growing back in, it gets really shrubby, and every few years, there's a blanket spray, aerial spray of herbicide applied, and suddenly there aren't naked branches of shrubs and woody plants. The woody plants, the broadleaf plants are killed, and what's left are grasses and ferns for a few years until once again succession brings in the shrubby growth. It was interesting to me because birds who select that old growth kind of habitat that's really shrubby do come into these deep forests along these corridors and nest. Birds like the indigo bunting that you see at a nest on the right in this slide. Well, they come back to their territories, and sometimes it's after a spray, and the habitat is not suitable for them at all. But they come back and they sing and they try to nest. But what they're left for nesting is something like a bracken fern instead of a woody shrub like you see on the right. And the nest falls out of the fern and fails. This really got me interested in knowing, instead of just going out and counting birds and measuring plants, I really wanted to know what was going on with individual birds and how they were succeeding in their reproductive attempts. I wanted to know, well, what's happening under those leaves? I came to Michigan soon after that, and I worked with Bob Payne, who you see in the photo on the left, and his wife Laura. Bob was leading a long-term study of song and reproductive success of the indigo bunting, that incredibly beautiful bird that you see in the right-hand part of the slide. That's me with the audio equipment a long time ago. And so we captured and color banded every indigo bunting, male and female, and found all their nests and banded all their babies in 2 different populations in southern Michigan. I worked on this project for almost 7 years. I was so tuned in to indigo buntings that to this day, if one chips or flutters or buzzes or sings, I jump and say, "Bunting!" And I also have not been able to turn off my nest finding antennae that are just always on, because we had to find every nest of the indigo bunting. So I just notice nesting behavior of birds. Jamie's texting me, so I have to take a peek. Uh-oh, he said start OBS. Oh, rats. Is it, Michael, is it working? All right, I'm going to step away for a minute because Jamie told me I need to start my OBS. Are you there? You're getting it? Okay. Jamie told me I had to start OBS for some reason. All right, Jamie says start OBS, but my husband says it's working fine. So I'm going to go take you back into my PowerPoint, and all right, so folks, I'm going back into the PowerPoint. I think that you can still hear me. Jamie, I'm not going to answer your text. Sorry. Go back into the PowerPoint. Okay. And hi, Jamie. I'm going to say it's working. Okay. So, as I was saying, I'm really tuned into nesting. And so what I'm going to do is take you through the nesting cycle of birds in general, of songbirds in general, But you'll see that I use indigo buntings and palm warblers a lot as examples because I have a lot of photos of them. In the spring, starting very soon, uh, the adult males actually are the first birds who come back to territories where they nested the year before. In fact, I found that my palm warblers, like this one in the photo, um, come the adult birds come back even before we're seeing palm warblers migrating through the area. It turns out the big flushes of birds moving through are often the first year nesting birds. So by the time the first year birds show up, the adult birds are already on their territories saying, "This is mine." You'll have to find your own place. But I think that that also plays a role for the young birds in that they know this might be a good place to nest. There's somebody here already who looks and sounds like my own kind. And so the young birds settle in often around the territories of the older birds. And they start singing and they all fight and they establish space for everybody or else someone has to leave. Mourning doves are already starting to nest. They're really early nesters. In this case, these three mourning doves look like they're very calmly sitting in the sand, hanging out in the spring sunshine, but there's actually a lot of underlying tension in the picture. Um, the two birds on either side are males. The bird in the middle is a female. And a split second after this happened. I don't know about you, but I think the guy on the left looks a lot more symmetrical. He's a bit more handsome. Who knows? Maybe he's smarter, maybe he's not. Mourning doves generally aren't smart at all. But who would you pick for your mate if you had the choice? Well, after choosing mates, very soon, females get right to work selecting a nest site and building a nest. This white-crowned sparrow is picking up pieces of grass, starting the rough outer part of a nest in Oregon, actually. And this palm warbler is finishing up a nest with softer materials. Palm warblers, I have found, I want to say always, but every nest I found of a palm warbler has been lined with feathers. This photo capture was done by Bob Payne. I'm hearing from Jamie again. I'm stopping for a second. He says it's go time, and I said it's going. I'm sorry for the interruption here. So the palm warbler lines its nest with feathers, and I was just lucky that I had Bob out in the field helping me with my study 25 years after I'd helped him with his when this female came in out of nowhere. So the nest is built. Different species of birds build different looking nests. Is it working, Michael?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Um, build different looking nests. Vireos tend to build nests like the one on the left. It's a neatly woven nest hanging from a fork in a branch. And red-eyed vireos will often incorporate those pretty pieces of white birch bark, paper birch bark, within their nest. The messy nest on the right is built by an alder flycatcher, which you can see in the lower right. And I have found that some of the flycatchers have really messy undersides to their nests. They're more tidy inside the cup. Nests need to be well hidden because if they're not, there won't be successful reproduction for that bird that year, probably, in many cases. The northern parula on the left is a warbler that nests along in old man's beard that looks like moss. It's a lichen, and here it's growing right along the shore of Lake Superior. The nest, my pointer, oh, it will work. Wouldn't work before. The northern parula nest is somewhere right near the middle of this photo, and I can't even be sure exactly anymore where it is, but I guarantee that there was a nest there, very well hidden. The Canada warbler nest is in a swamp, this one in a rotting stump, and I'm circling where the nest actually is. Very well hidden nest. Songbirds don't build any nest at all. In this case, I was walking from point A to point B and I flushed a common nighthawk from her eggs. If you look carefully, you might see them. She doesn't build an egg. She doesn't build a nest. There's just a scrape on the ground where there are pebbles, and the eggs blend in nicely with those pebbles. If you haven't found it yet, I'll show you right there. 2 eggs. Once I knew where this nest was, I had to pass by there a lot, but I just walked by a little further away and I didn't disturb her at all. In fact, this is the female and she's asleep. Her eyes are closed. Here's her bill. Here's a wing and another wing and her tail. Um, and nighthawks are active at night, so I could go by her on a fairly frequent basis and not even wake her up. This is a better view of a nighthawk from a different place, just so you can see. It's a pretty funny looking bird when it's on the ground. Incubation starts as soon as the last egg is hatched, and no sooner. It takes 24 hours for each egg to develop, and so the female lays 1 egg every 24 hours. In this case, it would take 4 days for that alder flycatcher to lay those 4 eggs, and then with the last one, she starts incubating. When it's really hot outside, the eggs might start developing before she incubates, but not in most cases. That way, all of the eggs hatch on the same day. The nest on the right is a hermit thrush nest. This is a relative of our robin, and you might notice how those pretty eggs are similar to the robin's egg color, but hermit thrushes nest on the ground. Within one species, there can be some variation in egg color, but they're generally pretty similar. The yellow-rumped warbler, these are all yellow-rumped warbler eggs in this slide, and like a lot of the other warblers, they have speckles in a wreath toward the wide end of the egg, and it might be specks and it might be blotches or it might be a combination of the two. But one female is likely to lay eggs through her life that look pretty much the same. The female indigo bunting I'm showing you here, but all of the birds that I'm talking to you about develop a brood patch. They lose the feathering on the breast, and the skin that is then bare gets really vascularized and spongy, edematous, so that it's a nice, warm, soft surface. You can see the feather tracks grow on either side of that bare brood patch, and so she can kind of hunker down on her eggs and close that crown of feathers around the eggs and keep them toasty warm. This is a little video. I don't know how well it'll come through, but this female palm warbler is preening, and you'll see right there, she parts her breast feathers. So you can see that, you might have seen that yourself with birds that have a brood patch, so you can get a little clue of what you're looking at when you see that in the future. So incubation lasts about 12 days. That's 12 days of keeping that nest hidden from predators. There is a hermit thrush in the middle of this slide, and right there is her eye and her tail. But she's just super well hidden on the ground. If you're a ground nesting bird, you really are vulnerable to predators. In this slide, a red-eyed vireo is peering from behind that leaf in the middle. There's an eye right here, an eye over here. But when a nest is placed, the female needs to have escape routes and she needs to be able to see out, but she also wants to be really well hidden. You might even see birds going around trying out different nesting spots before they actually build. This red-eyed vireo nest really looks like this when the leaves are parted, and it had 3 eggs. That's what an adult red-eyed vireo looks like in the upper left-hand slide. Jerry Jordan, friend, supplied that for me. Thank you. So here's an American redstart nest, another one of the wood warblers here, and they nest in northern Michigan. But I just wanted to show you how well hidden the female is on her nest, on those 4 eggs, whereas the male is really bright colored, and he flashes that tail and shows his colors as he flits around, and he sings incessantly. After 12 days of incubation or so, the eggs hatch. Not all exactly at the same time, but with luck, they all hatch on the same day. Inside of the egg, the little bird has this tiny little sharp spot on the tip of its upper bill. That's called the egg tooth. And they push from the inside of the egg around the circumference of the shell, and we call that pipping. So they do these little pips all the way around in a circle, and then they can push open the egg. You might have seen those marks, but next time you see a bird egg piece on the ground that the adult has carried away from the nest, you might take a closer look and see if you can see the tiny pip marks from the egg tooth of the hatchling. Nestlings of what we call altricial birds hatch when they are very poorly developed. They have a long way to go. So you can see in the upper right-hand photo, the babies are just hatching. That unhatched egg hatched before the end of the day. Those are yellow warbler babies in a really nice soft bed of a nest there. You can see these babies are still kind of wet, and they have about 12 more days to be in that nest. On the right, upper right, this is a goldfinch nest. They nest late in the summer, and I think the young look pretty hot in that nest. And then down at the bottom, dark-eyed junco babies in what I think is the most beautiful nest I ever found, lined with white deer hair against the lovely gray plumage of those little nestlings. I just thought it was a really, really pretty nest. Well, altricial birds can be contrasted with the precocial young of birds like chickens or grouse. This is a spruce grouse. It's only a few days old. Precocial birds spend much more time inside the egg, and when they hatch, within 24 hours, they leave the nest. You see those great big feet? Pretty soon after hatching, they can use those feet to leave the nest with mom. There is a spruce grouse chick right about there in this photo. So because they can't fly, they need to be very well hidden as they start their first days out of the nest with mom. When a family of grouse is disturbed, all of the young scatter in all directions and they stay real quiet. And then when the mom feels it's safe, she gives the signal, makes a sound, and the babies all come running and they hide underneath her. In this case, I watched 7 young go underneath mom, and there were more. And you couldn't even see them. She could hide them so well. I don't know, Jamie keeps telling me to go, but I'm going.
You're ahead of the slide.
Yeah, there's 10-second lag. That's why. 3 weeks later, we ran into this same. Can you text with him for me? 3 weeks later, I went to my car and I ran into probably the same family of spruce grouse, and you can see the young flew up into the trees, and you can see that it's much more developed. It can fly. I call it an adolescent here in the picture. So I've been paying close attention to the development of palm warblers in my study, and I wanted to take you through some of the development that I found looking at them closely. On hatch day, you can see that um, the wings are, there's no pigment at all. You can't see any feathers growing underneath the skin. Eyes are closed. This one's still wet from just hatching. Day 2, you can see some pigmentation of those flight feathers beginning to grow under the skin. I'd like you to see also on day 2 the fat little leg of the baby. It's short and fleshy, whereas on day 3 you can see the leg is starting to elongate and become slimmer, and the flight feathers are becoming much more apparent in the wing. On day 4, the flight feathers are even more developed. You can see here the track of feathers growing under the skin down the back and starting to poke out. And by day 6, you can see those pin feathers, or the quills of those developing contour or flight feathers, getting even longer. What I would like you to really see in this photo is how much slimmer and longer what we call the tarsus, what you would call the leg of the baby, has become. I could actually band this baby at this age, but not sooner because the leg is too fleshy before this. By day 8, what we see is the feathers starting to emerge from the quills or from the pins here. So the actual feathers are poking out, eyes open. They're open usually day 6 too, but the babies fall asleep in my hands a lot. Day 9, it's looking more like a bird. The feathers are emerging a lot more from the pins, and by day 11, this kid is ready to leave the nest. They can survive if they leave the nest day 9, but it's much better if they stay in the nest longer and can actually fly short distances. They explode from the nest, and a couple days later look more like birds. You can even see some yellow in the feathering underneath. But one thing I'd like you to notice is that while the kids are still in the nest, their tail is short. A tail really gets in the way in the nest. But as soon as they're out of the nest, that tail starts to grow, and it grows pretty quickly, giving them better balance in flight. By day 24, so 24 days after hatching, this is what the young juvenile bird looks like. 14 days after leaving the nest. The tail is long. They look a little scruffy. They start feeding on their own. They peck at things a lot. That even though they can get some of their own food, they still freeload off mom and dad a lot. I would like to show you here the differences between altricial birds and precocial birds in their development. You can see that the incubation time of a warbler, an indigo bunting, and a song sparrow, incubation of those eggs takes about 12 days. They're in the nest 8 to 10 days, so that the total developing time from the egg being laid till the baby's leaving the nest is about 22 days. In contrast, the ruffed grouse with precocial young incubates in that egg for 23, 24 days and has just 24 hours maybe in the nest before they leave. But I think the cool thing is here that if you look at the overall development time from the egg being laid to the baby leaving the nest, they're pretty similar. Another interesting comparison is cavity nesting birds who have altricial young. This is a red-breasted nuthatch. You can tell a red-breasted nuthatch nest. This is in a very dead tree, but they put this rosin or sap at the opening, and it's disputed as to what benefit they get from that, but it's a good way to identify the nest as a red-breasted nuthatches. So these guys because the nest is so safe, the young can stay in there longer and not leave until they're really ready to fly. For example, in this table you can see the yellow warbler, indigo bunting, hairy woodpecker, red-breasted nuthatch. Their incubation time is about the same period of time, but nestling days, the woodpecker and the nuthatch in their safe cavities can stay a lot longer. So the period of time from hatching from the egg to actually leaving the nest is much longer. These are much safer, but because they're in that cavity for so long, sometimes they have a little more trouble with external parasites. Well, leave the nest, you are a fledgling. Some of them are really ugly. I think a baby blue jay is something only a mother could love. They're really funny looking. Over here in the upper right is a bay-breasted warbler fledgling, an adult. Here's a Canada warbler fledgling, an adult for comparison. You can see what they're aiming to become. And down below, a tiny newly fledged Nashville warbler and the adult bird. Here are some of those villains, the nest predators everybody has to eat. But surprisingly enough, the white-tailed deer is a pretty major predator of, in particular, ground nests. They'll just be browsing along the ground and come across a nest of baby birds, and they just eat them, and they often eat the nest as well. Red squirrels are also big nest predators, and they will easily catch fledglings as well and eat them, and juvenile birds. Blue jays are big nest predators, and they're really sneaky. They are watching you. So if there are blue jays around, don't ever go to a nest. Raccoons follow scent trails. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Chipmunks, this one happens to be a least chipmunk, but chipmunks are nest predators as well. And this particular garter snake in this photo probably just consumed the contents of a palm warbler nest, little babies. So, how can you unlock the secrets of nesting without endangering the success of the nest, of the birds who are nesting? I suggest you try keeping careful field notes of your observations. My husband and I really enjoy keeping detailed notebooks. Some people might do that on a phone now, but we like our books. I would suggest you be careful to describe behavior really objectively instead of saying you watched a chipping sparrow pick a nest spot. Instead, say, I watched a chipping sparrow today, and it hopped from branch to branch, and it would get into little crotches and kind of wiggled, hunker down, and look in one direction, look the other direction, and it was in this particular tree. And then you might go back and check that tree a couple weeks later and see if you were right. Was there a nest there? Revisit the same area through the nesting season. Different birds will be doing different things because they'll be at different stages of their nesting cycle. And if you notice that, you might be able to piece something together at a later time. Spend time in that area year after year and look in the winter too, because you can see old nests in the winter that aren't visible in the summer. If there's a nest in a place in the winter and you think, I wonder what built this nest. If you go back to that same place in the summer, it's very likely that same species of bird is there and they're nesting, and they might even nest in the same tree or very nearby. And you might get your questions answered. If you find a nest, and I suggest you do not actively look for nests because you're likely to trample babies or step on nests or cause more damage than you meant to. But if you happen to find a nest, minimize your nest visits if you want to keep track of the success of that nest. Just go a few times. Give it a few days or a week before you go back again, depending at what stage the nest is. But walk by the nest. Don't make a path up to it that dead ends and walk away, but instead make a path that continues right past the nest. You're making a scent trail, and if you walk up to the nest and leave, a few hours later, a raccoon is going to come along with its nose to the ground and follow your trail right to supper. Keep your hands off the nest. If you need to move vegetation to peer into the nest, use a twig to part the leaves so that you're not putting your scent right on those plants. For higher up nests, I made a little nest stick, I call it, where I attach a mirror to an extendo. So, once you have a bunch of evidence, what can you do with it? I'm going to show you an example. In 2012, I know it's a while ago, but it's a really nice example that I like to keep track of. On July 5th of 2012, I saw a female purple finch gathering hair from our bird feeder, and so I knew that she must be lining a nest someplace. August 7th, a long time later, I hadn't really thought about that purple finch female, but August 7th, there was a male with juvenile birds who were just figuring out how to eat seeds at the feeder. But look, they have long tails. They've been out of the nest a while. I wondered, could these two observations be connected? I constructed what I call a nest calendar. You can see that I made a calendar where on July 5th I put in my observation of the female gathering hair. NB means nest building. She's nest building. I then on August 7th put in my observation that the male and the long-tailed young were at the feeder. I went to my reference, The Birds of North America, you can see up here, which is online. It's hosted by Cornell. This particular reference you can access with a subscription through the public library. You can't get to it just on your own unless you have like a U of M account. And so from the reference, I found that purple finches lay an average of 4 eggs in their nests. They incubate about 12 days. They're on those eggs. And then the young are in the nest 13 to 16 days after hatching before they fledge, before they leave the nest. And so I thought, well, okay, so those were pretty big babies. No, I'll work from the other side. The female was gathering hair. She's finishing her nest. She probably laid an egg the next day. So in my nest calendar, I put her laying 1 egg a day, 4 eggs. Maybe she laid the average number. I don't know. But she would start incubating that same day. So I put in she incubated 12 days, and that would be hatch day. Day 1 of the life of her nestlings. And then I counted out the days of the life of the nestlings. And it turned out I decided, well, maybe they fledged on day 14. It says 13 to 16 days, which would give them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days to grow those long tails that I saw of the young at the feeder. I think that this gave me pretty good documentation that this pair of purple finches nested right in our backwoods. But I remembered, geez, there have been purple finches here all summer. I mean, even before July. So I went back in my notes and I saw, yeah, like even July 3rd, that I had a note in my notebook that said that there were 2 males, an adult female, and 2 fledgling. That's what F means. Fledgling purple finches at the feeder. It's noisy, but it's all coming from an adult female who's fluttering and calling, and the fledglings are perched and trying to feed, and she sounds sort of like wee-ah, 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 wee-ah all over and over. And this is what she looked like. Not a very good picture, but you can see her wings fluttering. Well, that means this July 3rd female was escorting fledglings from earlier in the year and mating, and she was also building the nest that I mapped and showed you already in the calendar. She had an earlier nest. So I backdated the way I showed you in the calendar, and I predicted, based on all those days from my reference, that she should have been nest building around May 30th. So I went back into my field notes. I thought, well, I wonder if I wrote anything down. Oh my goodness. On the 30th of May, 2012, I had written in my notebook, the purple finches are back, 2 males and a female. They were at our feeders. So, um, yes, they were there. So then I kept looking through my notebook after May 30th. On June 3rd, I had a little note that both the male and the female purple finch were at the feeders. June 5th, I had a note in my notebook that there was a snippet of purple finch song behind the house. And on June 9th, I had a fairly long note. There was a male purple finch at the feeder without the female. He has been singing. Like last year, I wonder if they're nesting here, since I read that the male feeds the female on the nest. So I made a nest calendar. For earlier in the season, I put in the male and the female at the feeder on May 30th. And I put in that there was a family at the feeder here, and those babies had pretty long tails. But then what I did was, and so I put in then possible nest building, egg days, incubation days, nestling days, fledging days, giving enough time after leaving the nest for those kids to have fairly long tails at the feeder. Then I looked at my notes that I had written in between those dates. Well, the adults were at the feeder together on a day when she laid her first egg. I didn't know that, until then. On June 5th, the male was singing. The female laid egg 3. There were only 3 fledglings, so I only had her lay 3 eggs in this calendar. And then on June 9th, there was a male there with no female. She was incubating. I have read that he feeds her on the nest, so that might be a reason he was at the feeder without her. There's a big gap. I didn't take any notes about them because I was doing other things. But I think that in these few observations that I had in looking at the nesting biology of purple finches, that I have pretty good evidence that these purple finches successfully raised 2 broods in our backwoods. That is a pretty rare feat for migrating birds. So I felt like this was a pretty cool discovery. I don't think that palm warblers that I study, I don't think that they could pull this off. Maybe once in a blue moon, but very probably not possible. To be leaving the nest so late in the season makes it pretty hard to be ready to do a really long migration in the late summer and fall. So my message to you is you could also keep careful notes from your walks, your hikes, and you might learn a whole lot more than what you had intended, whether it's about birds or plants or something else. If you're looking for references for birds, a good, easy to access one online is the Cornell Labs All About Birds site. And sometimes, and they'll have songs and photos and all kinds of great resources. In the case of the Yellow-rumped Warbler, they even have the nesting facts that I had. They don't have them for all species. So there you go. There's a Nashville warbler hiding on a nest, and the end of my presentation. I would like to thank these friends who helped supply who helped supply photographs for my presentation. Most of the photos are mine, and the ones taken by other people have the credit actually in the corner of the photo. Thanks so much for sticking with me to this point. I hope that this actually worked as a whole stream. And what I'm going to do now is leave the PowerPoint, and I'm going to go to my view in a different browser of this same stream. So I'll keep the stream going if people wanted to ask any questions. I'll be there in a second.
And click play again and it'll run a second time.
I don't understand that right now, but oh, I had a window in Safari open. So everybody can see this, but I'm going to put in Huron Valley Group Sierra Club. Oh no, it's YouTube that I need. So sorry, folks.
Well, I'm seeing comments.
Okay, YouTube. And then I need to go to here, Huron Valley Sierra Club, and there it is, and okay, YouTube. I'm turning off my microphone, and then I need to go to oh, I can't here. Turn off my microphone. Yeah. I'm turning off my speaker. Okay, so huh.
I'm seeing.
So Juliet Berger was seeing it,
Yes.
and in the next couple of days. All right, so it's still streaming. I'm here. I know. So, oh, I don't have to type, but I know Dan's video audio went crazy, but I think the rest of the stream worked.
You got that? Just click on the link in your presentation again and the stream worked fine.
Susan, just click on the link in your presentation again. The stream worked fine. I don't know if the chat will continue if I stop the stream.
Juliet has a question for you.
Okay, I think you can still hear me out there. I'm sorry for my mumbling. So I'm leaving the stream running. I know you see my screen and everything. That's fine. Oh, I was going to try to do this in Safari. Let's see if I click Safari, what happens. No. All right, never mind. So Juliet, you said, why did you decide to study palm warblers? I didn't in this because palm warblers are like a whole nother presentation. But basically, it's a long answer. But they're just really interesting birds to me. They nest both in bogs and in upland jack pines, really different habitats. I noticed something really interesting about their song. and I wanted to pursue that. And they're very studyable in that they nest on the ground, and so you can see where the nest is. And that was it. Is the audio still coming through?
I've turned my audio off.
Yeah, we have the audio turned off here otherwise because there's like
Yes.
okay, we have established that there is still audio happening.
Click on the link to Dan's video.
Click on the link to Dan's video in your presentation. Oh, I'll try clicking on the link to Dan's video in my presentation again. Oh, but what was interesting about their song? Can you turn your audio? Okay, so what was interesting about their song? We went into this jack pine plantation actually looking for Kirtland's warblers, and I heard this song, and I didn't really know it, and I went back, and it turned out I didn't know that song because it didn't sound like a palm warbler song. It was a palm warbler. When I went back, yeah, I have the YouTube window open on purpose. I hope that you guys can tolerate it because I think that I need to be able to I need to be streaming to talk to you, and I don't have something. This is how I can see what you're writing to me. So if you can just bear with that ugly window, that I hope that's okay. Um, so uh, I went back to this place and I saw that there were about 6 palm warblers singing, and they were singing different songs, and it wasn't the song that I knew for palm warblers at all. Palm warblers normally go zuzz, 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 really boring. And this didn't sound like that at all. But then a bird would sing this kind of tickety, tickety, tickety song, and it would fly like 500 feet away, and then it would sing zuzz, 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 zuzz. And so there was something interesting about that to me, having studied birdsong. Okay. Any more questions? I will try going back to my presentation, and so that means I go back to PowerPoint. I can't see what you're writing to me anymore when I go to the PowerPoint. By hitting the pause button, you can turn off the video playing in the window by hitting the pause button. Mouse over the video, and here's pause. And wow, I was told that in my instructions, if I did pause, I would probably lose the link. But is there anything now? Is it still working?
Same screen.
Okay. So I did that. Oh, it's still working. Okay.
I'm gonna get my headphones.
Okay. So I did that. I'm gonna try to play Dan's. Yeah, it is. That's great. So I'm going to go to my PowerPoint and play Dan's movie. Okay. So I'm gonna leave you guys. I can't see. But I don't know if it'll work because he had me press pause. All right. Oh, I have to pick this slideshow. Dan video. So you're gonna tell me if Dan's video shows up. Oh, I don't know why it won't work. Let's see.
of sound.
Yeah. And so I think it's done probably. Let's see if I go. It says to end stream.
Hi, and welcome to the Sierra Club Huron Valley Group's St. Patrick's Day / Coronavirus March program meeting. My name is Dan Ezekiel. I'm the chair of the executive committee of the Sierra Club Huron Valley Group. And our motto is explore, enjoy, and protect the planet. I want to thank Jamie McGeera for figuring out how to do the live stream tonight. And if you're not a member of the Sierra Club, America's oldest and largest environmental group, we want you to join right away. And you join by going to the website sierraclub.org. Now get ready for some really snazzy special effects right now. That website is sierraclub.org. So join today. When you join at the national level, you have also joined at the local level. I'm sorry we have to do our meeting this way this month. I've actually been looking forward to this particular meeting for a long time because of the presenter. And you know, our monthly programs with our amazing presenters, name badges, Ruth's Coffee and Cookies, the Sierra Club banner, meeting someone we don't know, all that. It's a wonderful ritual. Like Joni Mitchell says, you don't know what you've got till it's gone. But it is the way it is, and we're going to make the very best of it tonight with a terrific speaker and a terrific topic. First, I have a few announcements. We had some great outings in late February and early March, but our physical outings are currently shut down by edict of the National Sierra Club as well as by common sense. According to the National Club, we can't have any face-to-face events until at least April 12th. That doesn't stop you from going outside to enjoy early spring in nature or in your garden or in your yard or on your street. But we'll also be having some virtual hikes, and they'll be advertised on the sites where we usually post our hikes. So look out for those. Thanks to our wonderful outing chairs, Anya Dale and John Metzler, for the work they always do, the good work they always do, organizing our hikes and our service projects, and we look forward to getting back to the real thing before long. But right now they're figuring out how to put up some virtual hikes just for inspiration. So the November election is the Huron Valley Group's top priority in 2020. We want to elect an environmentalist president and make sure that Michigan's electoral votes go to an environmentalist president, and we want to elect an environmentalist State House of Representatives here in Michigan. Last month, we wrote letters to low-inclination Michigan voters at our program meeting, and then we had a follow-up letter writing party at the Eastside Argus Farm Stop. I want to thank Argus and its owners, Bill Brinkerhoff and Kathy Sample, for hosting us. So far, we've produced over 180 letters. We were planning another party next Tuesday, March 24th, and though it can't be face-to-face, we haven't quite given up on the idea. If we can figure out a way for you to come and get letters from us or for us to bring the letters to you, we'll get an email out about it. Anyway, you don't have to wait for us. You can just go to the website, voteforward.org. That's votefwd.org. Go through their simple joining process, and soon you can be downloading letters and writing them. Maybe this would be a good activity for you and your family to do when you're stuck at home, and instead of fretting about the election and fretting about the news, you can be doing something about the election instead. We're not telling these low inclination voters who we want them to vote for. We're just asking them to vote, and we're telling them why voting is important for us. And this strategy has found out to be very beneficial for environmentalist and progressive candidates. So if you end up downloading your own letters and writing them at home, please keep track of how many you and your family produce so we can add them to the grand total for the Huron Valley Group. Lastly, and also speaking of elections, if you're interested in running for the executive committee, which is the leadership group of HVG, you need to be nominated, and there are several paths for you to be nominated by, and it needs to happen by summer, and the election is this December. You would be serving next year in 2021 and 2022. There are 4 seats up, and at least one current member of the executive committee is not planning to run for re-election, so we definitely need some good candidates to step up. If you'd like more details about what it means to be on the executive committee, you can email me or any executive committee member. And if you're sure you want to be a candidate, already know it, you can email the chair of our nominations committee, Richard Barron. So here we go. If you already know you want to be a candidate, why don't you email Richard Barron, rmorleybarron@gmail.com, and there are 2 R's in his last name. If you want to talk about what does it mean to be on the executive committee or anything else, please email me, dan.ezekiel24@gmail.com. There are no A's in my last name. dan.ezekiel24@gmail.com. Okay, without any further ado, let's get to our speaker. Susan Kelb is my friend. She's my old teacher colleague, and she is a citizen scientist extraordinaire. Susan is a quiet, observant woman who loves birds and loves sharing her enthusiasm about birds, and she understands birds better than anyone else that I've ever met. For many, many years, Susan has been studying the nesting patterns of songbirds, and tonight we get to share in all that she has learned about that subject. So, drum roll, please, everybody. Take it away, Susan.
Okay, so Dan's video is done, and I don't see any more questions right now. And whoever's out there, thanks for being with us while you were. And I think I'm going to sign off. I don't see a note from anybody. And we're trying to figure out our little complications. So take care, everybody. Good night.